Let's talk about what not to say to a same-sex struggler. Now, a same-sex struggler isn't just someone who's gay or LGBT. If someone's attracted to the same sex, that doesn't mean they're in conflict over those attractions. It only means they have those attractions. But in the church, it's different. When a person is both a born-again believer and someone who experiences attractions to the same sex, then there's going to be a struggle for obvious reasons. That person knows, according to Scripture, that God never intended him or her to be homosexual or to act on those feelings. So he sees those feelings as a part of the sin nature, which we all have. So instead of coming out of the closet and declaring, "I'm gay," he decides to resist those desires when they come up, take up his cross, get grounded in a community of believers, and lead a godly life. Now, I think it's safe to say that most every church has same-sex strugglers. Sometimes they're too afraid of what people will think of them, so they keep the struggle to themselves. But nowadays, more and more of them are coming forward saying, "I'm part of the church body. I wrestle with homosexual temptations. I don't want to give in to them, so what do I do?" I've asked that question myself because I've experienced that same struggle, and I needed believers who'd be there for me. Thank God they were there. You can be there too, for someone wrestling with same-sex temptations, and there's a good chance you will be. So when that happens, let me suggest a few things not to say to the same-sex struggler.
Snap out of it!
Okay, that's not going to work. Telling someone to just snap out of their same-sex struggle is like telling someone to just snap out of their temptation to lust or to overeat or to punch somebody out. We don't choose to have temptations. We just choose whether or not we're going to give in to them. Now, that brings up an important point. There are universal temptations we can all relate to, like the temptation to steal or to lie. And there's temptations like homosexuality that are experienced only by a minority. Now, both kinds of temptations come from the sin nature. So basically, we're all in the same boat. We don't ask for the sort of temptations we have, but we have the responsibility before God to not give in to them. So if you have a temptation and you admit it to somebody, imagine how you'd feel if they said,
"Stop it!
What? Stop being tempted?
Stop it!
What? Stop wayward thoughts from ever entering my mind?
Just stop.
Stop being human?
Stop it!
Well, okay, you should exhort someone to stop sinning, but don't tell them to stop being tempted to sin, because in this life, until Christ comes or takes us home, that's not going to happen. Not to them, not to you. Now, another thing not to push on the same-sex struggler is
Marriage.
marriage isn't a cure, it's a covenant. And if someone isn't ready to enter into that covenant, they've got no business getting married. After all, if marriage cured a man of sexual temptations, then there'd be no married men who look at porn, go to strip clubs, or commit adultery. Now, a same-sex struggler may find that he or she really does become attracted to someone of the opposite sex. That happens. And often that person still may have some attraction to the same sex, but he says no to them. And after all, isn't that what most married people do anyway? We may feel attracted to someone who's not our spouse, but that doesn't mean we don't feel something for our spouse. It doesn't negate what we have. But marriage calls for a lot more than sexual arousal. A person needs to be mature enough to take on the responsibility of marriage, including the responsibility to meet his partner's sexual needs. And if he's not ready to do that, marriage sure isn't going to make him ready. Now, a final thing to avoid is, "I cast you out!" Now, I do get it. When we don't understand why someone feels a certain way, or when their problem is very deeply ingrained, it's tempting to just label it a demon. But in both the Old and the New Testament, sexual sin is viewed primarily as a problem of the flesh, not something demonic. Now, for sure, Satan loves it when we yield to sin. And hey, if I were him, I'd do all I could to destroy the family unit. So I'm sure he has a lot to do with tempting us to sin, deceiving us into thinking the sin is okay, and then condemning us when we give in to it. But the sin itself is best viewed as a problem of the flesh, and we don't cast the old nature out. We resist it, we crucify it, we reckon it dead, we refuse to let it define us. And when we do that, we realize something.
Maybe my nature does draw me to you. That don't mean I have to go with it. I can take hold of myself, and I can say yes to some things and no to other things that are going to ruin everything. I can do that. Otherwise, you know what? What good is this stupid life that God gave us? I mean, for what?
We realize that God gives us the grace and the power to say no to what we used to say yes to. Now, some people who struggle with same-sex desires find those desires have less and less of a hold on them. Others find they have to wrestle with them daily. Some get married, some stay single. But in general, they're all Christians who take up their crosses, grow in grace, follow Him, and lead hard on other believers as members of the same body. And doesn't that really describe all of us? I'm Joe Dallas. It's good talking with you. Thanks for being here.